Good morning. How are you this morning? I'm doing well. The Dallas Stars play at 3 today. They're one game up in their series against those evil people known as the St. Louis. I don't even know their name. It's just from St. Louis. Our next sermon series is out of the book of Exodus. But if you look in the bulletin, it says Genesis chapter 15. That is not a misprint. You cannot discuss the book of Exodus without discussing Genesis chapter 15. Why? Because Genesis chapter 15 essentially gives you the entire story of the Exodus in about 3 verses. But that's not going to save you from the book of Exodus. Into the book we will go, and when we are done, we will exodus out of Exodus. It was there. It was a low-hanging curve. Come on, folks. Work with me. Work with me. Stephanie's not in here because she's in children's church. Did you see the lovely post she posted yesterday? I get to buy another gun. It was wonderful. I was moved. This generosity is unbelievable in that woman. Genesis chapter 15, starting in verses 12. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, a dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. The Lord said to Abram, "Know for certain that your offsprings will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. And I will bring judgment upon the nation that they serve, and afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. And as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete." Now, when Abram gets this letter, he is not, or when God tells Abraham this information, Abraham is not putting 2 and 2 together that it's the Egyptians. But we know after now having the book of Exodus that what he is talking about is the book of Exodus, the story of Exodus in itself. And notice this is part of the promise God gives to Abraham, where he's promising Abraham he's going to make him a great nation. Sons are going to come from him. This is part of the long discussion between 15 and 17, where the nation of Israel is being laid out, that Abraham's descendants will be numerous as the sand of the sea. But God first looks at him and says, "I want you to go sleep." And as he's asleep, notice what the text says, a great and dread falls upon him. Well, why is this? Well, think about it. If you are being told that your children are going to wander, become slaves, and be tormented, are you going to have a happy dream? No. I was having a dream last night. One of my kids tripped and fell on a pair of scissors, and then it's when I woke up, because it's like going, and I wasn't like going, whew, man, I wonder which one it was. It's funnier when you laugh. It really is. No, I woke up. Why? Because something happening to your children is every parent's worst nightmare. If you love your children, right? You could torment me all day long, but better not put a hand on my child. Why? Because I'm very protective, as every parent should be. And Abraham is asleep, and the Lord tells him, your children, several things about what's going to happen. First of all, know for certain. Know for certain, will this event come to pass? Yeah, this is going to happen. This is unalterable. I want you to understand and know for certain one thing. Your children will be sojourners. They will be wanderers. They will be in a land that is not theirs. They will be in this land that's not theirs. And think about this. From the aspect of an individual that's been promised that I'm going to show you a land that will be yours, but your kids aren't going to possess it yet for a while either. And you think about this. We enjoy our homes. We put a paint on the wall to make it ours. We put pictures on the wall to make it ours. We stay inside of it, and we have a relative understanding of safety within the walls of our own home. In Italy, you'd have houses, and essentially your house became a fortress of the nighttime. Every house had a gated front gate and big fence in the back. And then when you went to bed every night, you reached out and you closed these massively thick wood shutters and then locked them to keep people from breaking in, because they had weird laws like if they have your property, you can't stop them. And for a Texas boy, I was like, I'm sorry, you can't shoot the guy? He goes, oh, you're not allowed to have firearms. It's a good thing I didn't bring them. But no, you can't do anything to them. If you touch them, you go to jail because you put your hands on them. It's the law. So at nighttime, you close up your house like this giant fortress, and you have relatively safety within the walls. It's kind of hard to feel safe in a tent. Your livestock have to be monitored consistently because you have no fence to put around your livestock. They haven't invented hot wires yet. And so you're going to have a land, you're going to travel in this land, but it's not your land, and you will be a wanderer there, and you will be unable to put down any types of roots, even though I've promised you land. Why? Well, we'll look at that here in a minute. Notice the next thing that is going to be slightly disturbing. It's not too bad that you're wandering. The land is not theirs, and they will be servants. That's a polite way of putting it. They will be slaves. You will wander in a place that is not yours, and then you will become slaves. You will lose your freedom to wander. You will lose your freedom to be able to do anything. You will lose the ability to possess anything at all. The animals that you have no longer are yours. Your children will be slaves. We have relative freedom here in America. We can come and go as we please. Imagine this news being told to Abram in a dream. It's probably one of the most unsettling dreams that you could have. Your kids are going to wander and have no home at all to place their head. Now they're going to become slaves to the people of the land they're wandering in. Great. Thank you. Love it. Right? And they will be afflicted for 400 years. I'm going to make them wander, I'm going to make them slaves, and I'm going to let them be afflicted. And see, when we think of affliction at times, we wonder if it's really, Pharaoh is going to unfriend the entire Israel people from Facebook. If you watch, especially, I kind of like watching the folks that flip out on social media, or some of the younger kids in colleges that flip over what their rights are. And you ought to, if you want some entertainment to make you laugh and then make you feel tragically horrific about where our nation is headed, watch college kids on campus react to things that they don't like to hear. Kind of like the kid that had to seek counseling for seeing Donald Trump written in chalk. I'm not a Trump fan, but if I saw it written in chalk, I might be tempted to take the T away. I wouldn't seek counseling for it. See, for them, that's affliction and oppression. Have you read the first part of the book of Exodus? It's a little bit more on getting your feelings hurt. I'm going to make them wander. I'm going to make them slaves. I'm going to make them suffer. Why? Why? God, why would you do this? Well, keep going. I will bring judgment on that nation. So they're going to go into the land. I'm going to punish the nation that's involved for all the misery that's involved. And then I'm going to take them out. I'm going to take you out prosperously. Now hold on. Don't think I'm going to preach health and wealth here for a minute here. Not going to happen. But you will come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. Boom, my notes there. Life's good for Abram. This is kind of like the story, much like Hezekiah. When Hezekiah didn't do what the Lord said, the Lord comes to Hezekiah and said, I'm going to take the kingdom from you, I'm going to tear it apart. But then Hezekiah laid his head down in peace because he was told by the Lord that it wouldn't be his children that suffered the division and the captivity. Abram, you get to go in peace. Go be with your ancestors. You will go to your fathers in a ripe old age, but know that your children will suffer. Know that your children will be wonders. Know that your children will be slaves. But at the end of the day, I'm going to punish the nation that has afflicted them and make them prosper, and make the children of Israel prosper. They will leave with that nation's wealth. Why? Because you have this cryptic passage. You say, man, he's already done with the verse. Yeah, no, I got a lot up here. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. You're going to wonder. You're going to be slaves. You're going to be oppressed. I'm going to punish that nation that beats you down, and you're going to leave with that nation's wealth because the Amorites are not yet complete. Well, who are the Amorites? They're one of the largest Canaanite tribes. Typically, it's a reference, when they mention the text of Amorites, it's typically representative of the totality of the Amorites. It's like saying, you Yanks. When I lived in Europe, I was called a Yank. I had to tell folks, it's not necessarily the smartest thing to do to call people from the South Yanks. While I understand what you're saying, where we're from, we don't do that. Well, why is that? The word represents the totality of the people. The Amorites represent the totality of Canaan. Now, why is this there? I am going to use you to destroy these people. Well, why don't you just destroy these people? Because I have a plan. And see, when we get to a passage like this, we run smack dab into the problem of evil and the problem of divine sovereignty and foreknowledge of God. How does God do what he is doing? And look at this plan. And if you go and you read the story of Exodus, all that is occurring here in 15 is played out in the book of Exodus. Now, a lot of times we look at the situation that we are in and we don't see where we fit on the continuum of God's plan. I think if you look at this, you've got a good idea of how God does a continuum. Sometimes many of you are going to wonder, not, I wonder what God is doing, although you do that as well. But you're going to wonder in life for a long while. Some of you are going through horrific problems. Some of you haven't had any problems yet. One of the things about how God knows and how God works things out and the problem of evil are one of the things that stump evangelical Christians. And we develop theories to answer them. And sometimes we develop very poor theories to answer them. One of the ways in which you answer this problem about how God knows, because here's the thing, can Abram's descendants not go into captivity? No, God says, no, for certain, this event will happen. It's going to occur this way. If it doesn't occur this way, is God a liar? Yeah, because this is written 400 years before the event actually occurs. So yeah, God would now be putting into print something that would be a lie. So how does God know? And why does God do the things he does? Has always been something that has kind of made a mystery for us, and we develop theologies and we develop philosophies to do this. And one of the ones, this is the most newest of the ones, is called open theism. What we do in open theism is that God is not all-knowing. Kind of flies into a handful of verses I can think of like that. God is not all-knowing. God, he kind of knows. He might have some understanding of knowing. He kind of has an idea of knowing. But what happens is he's just kind of floating along like the rest of us. And all of a sudden, bam! And he's like startled just like you are. The events of 9/11 caught him totally off guard. I remember sitting in class, at early morning classes, one of the few times I've ever gotten up that early before I joined the Army, especially for a seminary student to be up before the sun rises is rare. And I remember getting out of the class and walking downstairs, and all the TVs were on, and I saw the planes hit the tower, and I go, dude, what movie is this? And somebody goes, no, this just happened. I go, oh. I remember sitting and watching the whole day. Open theists will tell you, God was just, whoa. The problem with that is your God's an idiot. Why would you pray to a God who is not in control of the events of mankind? Because, hey, oh God, save me from this event. I know it's news to you now, but can you help a brother out? Sorry, I don't know how this is going to play out. Please! Why would I pray to that? I take my chances with something else. That's one way of dealing with God knowing and our actions and the problem of evil. Well, God doesn't know what's going to happen, so therefore he's absolved from all the things that happen. The problem is your God now is a moron. And he's not God. Why? Because he gets his knowledge the same way we get our knowledge. He's just a better tea leaf reader than me. That's not the God here in Genesis chapter 15. Notice he says, know this. Be assured this will occur. Your children will wander. Your children will be slaves. Your children will suffer. I'm going to punish this nation. Your children will come out with their wealth, and then I'm going to use them to destroy the Amorites. But their time is yet to be fulfilled. So into captivity you will go. Another way to do this, and this is popular among Baptists, and typically it's called backwards causation. But the way it's taught is, well, what God does is before the foundation of the world, let's call this A. I'll come all the way over here because I'm going to use the whole stage for this one. Over here is A. Before the foundation of the world, God looks forward into time, and he sees what you're going to do at B. I'm going to use Raymond Lindholm. All right, ask him. So at A, before the foundation of the world, God is going to see that at B, I whip out a pistol and I shoot Raymond Lindholm, 2 in the chest, 1 in the head. Now, we like this view, but unfortunately, we don't vet this view. Because this view does several things that are logically inconsistent with the nature of God and logically inconsistent with the nature of Scripture. First of all, you take God who is atemporal and you put him in temporalness. God says, I am both the Alpha and the Omega. I am the beginning and the end. Not I am the beginning and I will eventually become the end. I am the beginning and the end. When Moses says, tell me who is sending me, he doesn't go, I'm the guy that will eventually know all things. He says, I am the existent one. I am the one who exists. It says, I am who I am. That's the English way of translating it. In Hebrew is, I am the existent one who has existed. Before he even thought about making us. I existed and exist. So I've taken God, I've put him into time, which is logically inconsistent with his knowledge. But then here's the thing. My knowledge now gives God, or my action now gives God his knowledge. It's called backwards causation. My event in time gives God his knowledge, not God himself being the author of his knowledge. We got a problem with that. What's the problem? Well, Romans chapter 11. Oh, the depths and the riches and the wisdom of the knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgment, unfathomable his ways. Who has known? Put that right there so I can read a little bit better. Who has known the mind of the Lord? Who became his counselor? Who has first given him that he might be paid back again? If God gets his knowledge from my action, am I the one who's counseling God about future events? Yeah, actually, I very much am. God's knowledge is dependent upon my actions. J.P. Boyce. I'm going to read J.P. Boyce because J.P. Boyce is the founder of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in 1829. I like J.P. Boyce because he's one of the best Baptist theologians. There are others. This is what he says about God's knowledge. How does God know? Not as we gain it, by using faculties fitted to acquire it. It is even improper to speak of his knowledge by intuition. Kind of goes to the open theist argument, as is frequently done. All we can say is that his knowing is his essence, or his nature, knowing that it is something so inherent in his nature that it exists exclusively of any means obtaining it or perceiving it. Knowledge of God, therefore, not being acquired, cannot be increased. Time does not add to it. Succession of events does not bring it before God. All the objects of his knowledge are to himself eternally present and known. Acts chapter 2, verse 22. Men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus of Nazareth, the man attested to you by God with miracles, wonders, and signs, which God performed through him in your midst, just as yourselves know. This man, delivered over by the predeterminate plan and the foreknowledge of God, you nailed to the cross by the hands of godless men and put him to death. You can get into the Psalms. Once you're into the Psalms, you have tons of this. The Lord, make it known my end. What extent of my days? Let me know I am transient. Behold, you have made my days a hand's breadth, my life as nothing in your sight. Surely every man at his best is a mere breath. Surely every man walks about as a phantom. Surely they make an uproar for nothing. He amasses riches and does not know who will gather them. I know the Lord. For what do I wait? And now, Lord, for what do I wait? My hope is in you. On and on and on and on we can go. So one of the ways to deal with this is what you do is you put God in time. And here's the problem with this view. God, okay, let's say it's not logically inconsistent for God to come into time and look forward and determine. And it's not logically inconsistent for God to look at B to know what you'll do. The problem is you didn't solve the problem. If God knows at A that at B, I'm going to shoot Raymond Lindholm before the foundation of the world, then when I actually get to B, can I do anything other than shoot Raymond Lindholm? No. Because if he knows it before the foundation of the world, pow. You didn't solve the problem. Then another one is finally called determinism. Determinism says all things are set. And you are nothing more than a bit player whose total actions are controlled. And the problem with all three of these views is they actually fail. Either due to a logical inconsistency, a scriptural inconsistency, or both. The best, though not void of problems, is one which we call middle knowledge. Typically, it's now referred to as some form of Molinism, which essentially says that there are things in which God has active control over. This event in Exodus, God is actively in control over. Know this, Abraham. Your children are going to wander. Know this, Abraham. They are going to become slaves. Know this, Abraham. They are going to suffer. Know that I'm going to punish them, and know that they're going to come out with the riches. And so in one set, there are things that God controls, there are things that God knows, and there are things that God puts into motion. And then there are things that he allows us the ability to make decisions over. I do honestly believe that he allows us to pick our automobiles, because if he believed that one automobile was holy, we would all have the same automobile in the parking lot. Chevy trucks. But see, now apparently you are all missing God's will. I believe that God allowed me to dress myself this morning, and I think I did a fine job. That's my opinion. I believe there are things in life that God allows me to do in which I have a will that can act freely, but there are other things that he does not. My calling into the ministry was not something where I really got a vote in it. My coming to Skyline Baptist Church was not really something where I got a vote in it. Oh yes, you people took a vote. But I believe behind there was the hand of providence that was leading us all to this one point. I believe there are things that God controls, and then I believe there are things where man has some form of volitional will, but not totality, where he can make God an idiot, or where my actions determine God's knowledge, or that I am a bit player upon a stage and he knows all. I think you see this here in the book of in the book of Genesis. So what about the problem of evil? See, if God is in so control and he has certain events that he's controlling, and if he is controlling the events here, then he is responsible for this act. Because here's the thing. In the Exodus, there's a genocide. In the Exodus, the people are beaten. In the Exodus, the people suffer. Well, doesn't that make God the author of sin? No, it does not. One of the things is, if life was good in Egypt, would the children of Israel leave Egypt? When they come fleeing what? Famine. Hey, have you ever ate dust before? It don't taste well. They go to Egypt because Egypt had food. They settled in the land of Goshen, and they had a great time. If you're going to dislodge people who are comfortable, do you dislodge them with comfort or pain? Notice what he does. He allows the children of Israel to experience pain to where they will leave, but notice he doesn't leave them as refugees. They don't leave Egypt as refugees, because here's the thing, if numbers make you a nation, every Syrian refugee horde that comes across the border of Turkey into Europe could be its own nation. But why are they not a nation? Well, first of all, they don't possess enough money to pool together to make anything of themselves other than a nuisance. How does Israel become a nation? Well, they're going to need capital to do so. So what does God do? He punishes Egypt, and Israel leaves with all their nation, with all their wealth. Why? Because the Amorites' iniquity hasn't been fulfilled yet. And when that occurs, then I'm going to release Israel, and they are going to go and destroy the inhabitants of the land of Canaan. And that is one of the commands the Lord gives the children of Israel. Wipe them utterly from the face of the planet. Why? Because he knows that they will pull their heart away from God. Well, what about this problem of evil? Well, we'll handle this. I think that it's a matter of perspective. A matter of perception. Let's go back to the analogy where I put two in the chest of Raymond and one in his head. I take my pistol right now, which I don't have, but pow, 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 pow. Down goes Raymond. Show of hands, is that an evil act? I figured you would all say that. And the fact of the matter is, you don't know whether or not it was an evil act or not. All you know is I shot Raymond Lindholm. And your perception of the action is that it was evil. Come to find out, Raymond Lindholm is the notorious terrorist Carlos the Jackal. His signature sign is his bald head. Sorry, it was there, brother. It was another low-hanging curve. And Raymond has rigged the soundboard and the stuff on the stage in your pews and children's church to go up to kill the Christian devils for a Muslim cause, because he's a terrorist at pay. I think he'd have struck a bigger target, but hey, he's not all terrorists are smart. Raymond is, but you know. I shoot him before he hits the plunger. Now is the action evil? What changed? Nothing changed. I shot Raymond was what I asked. What changed was your availability to the knowledge of why I shot Raymond. A lot of times the issue with the problem of evil is that we are looking at it from the situation we are in, and then we go, this is evil, without seeing it from God's greater scope. You are going to be a wanderer. You are going to be a slave. You are going to be punished. This is evil. I'm going to lead you out as a wealthy nation. You will destroy the inhabitants of the land that are currently there. You are going to inhabit their cities, and you are going to be my nation. Depending on where you are on that continuum, you are going to determine whether or not the action is evil or not evil, because the proximity to information which you have. As finite beings, looking at a plan of an infinite God, we make judgment calls about God's plan with no more knowledge than what you saw with me shooting Raymond. Your proximity to the information will change your understanding of whether or not it's an evil act or not. Jim Elliot, run through the heart with a spear from an individual who he had dropped tracks to. Clearly an evil act, but in so doing, that man learns this gospel message and is responsible for the Alca Indians coming to know Jesus Christ. Perspective. See, what happens is we focus in on the narrow slice of the plan, assuming that our section of it and is all there is. And we make a judgment call about the nature of God. Now, are there significantly evil actions that occur? Sure. I believe those are actions that God allows to happen, like when the Babylonians take the baby infants and smash their heads against the stones. Sure. And then what does God do to the Babylonians to do that? Crushes them. Nazi death camps. Sure. And then what does the Lord do to the Nazi government? Crushes it. The Amorites are known for their wicked and pagan things. And what does he do with the children of Israel? He uses them to crush them, wipe them from the face of the earth. How God knows, how God acts. And a lot of times we see God work, and at times we ascribe to God things that are absolutely wrong. Lord, why? If you are a sojourner, it's not that bad. Life's not that hard. Okay, you don't have a permanent residence, but things are going well. If you're the slave, but you haven't started getting beaten yet, life's not that bad. Things are okay, but it's not as bad. But if you are in the midst of the Exodus when Pharaoh says, kill all male child, or when you're on the Exodus on the way out with the wealth of Egypt, where you are on the continuum of God's plan is where you take your snapshot of understanding, and from that then we begin to lay charges against the holy God of you are not fair. When the fact of the matter is, you have to look at the continuum of what God's plan is. Some of us on the continuum of God's plan seems like our life is just one of great suffering. Some of us, we look around and go, man, I wish I could be like that guy. Because he doesn't seem to suffer at all. And he may not. Or he may be suffering and you don't know. What happens is we look at the snippet and we declare things great evil. Notice right here. What does God say? Know for certain. Your offsprings will wander. They will be servants there. They will be afflicted, not for 40 minutes, 400 years. I will judge that nation with great possession, and you shall come up with great possessions. And then you will take over a nation and wipe them from the earth. See, when we get this kind of information, we're like, oh yeah, God, I can follow you all day long. But that's not faith. A lot of times we look at the suffering and the evils and the things, and we look at God and we go, how can you not know this? And he looks back at you and he says, my child, walk by faith and not by sight. Because it's in the greatest times. Have you ever noticed that your faith really doesn't grow well in great times? But in moments of great struggle, that's where your faith grows the greatest? What do you think that is? Because in those moments, that's when you realize the need and dependency upon a God who is not a better tea leaf reader than you, who you hope has not been looking through history and hoping he's made the right choice based upon your choice, or God who is totally sovereign in all events. You say, well, if God is totally sovereign, why do you pray? If God isn't totally sovereign, why would I pray? If he's not in control, why would I pray for him for help? It's like asking people to help you to do something that have no clue about what they're doing. If I got a problem at my house, guess who I'm calling? Sitting on the third row in a turnaround shirt. Kelly's not wearing a brown shirt. I love you, Nathan. But I'm not calling Nathan. Why? Because I know what he can do. When we suffer, the temptation is to look at the event in only the snippet of the information that we have and assume two things about God. Three things, actually. Either he's a mean dictator that plans this all out for his own purposes. Either he's a complete moron and has absolutely no clue about what he is doing. Or, God, please, that you've made the right decision based upon my action. Or the proper one, that he is the sovereign Lord over all things. This is what the disciples say. Who is this man that what? The wind and the storms obey. Speaks life into existence. Nothing comes into existence that he doesn't will into existence, but he sustains the earth. Where would you put your faith? In a God who is a moron. A God who is dependent on an exterior to provide him his knowledge. A God who has planned everything out and there is nothing to chance. Or a God who is sovereignly in control and yet allows things to happen to us without negating his sovereign control. You'll wonder. You'll be a slave. You'll be persecuted. In this case, they get delivered, but you may not in your life. But God doesn't cease being who he is where you are on your continuum. God doesn't cease being in charge, even though you may think him to be unfair. God doesn't cease being all-powerful, even though you think him to be wrong. This is the story of Job. This is the story of the Exodus. This is the story of Ruth. This is the story of the Judges. This is the story of David. This is the story of Christ. This is the story of your life. Where do you fall, and how have you been looking at the authority and knowledge of God? You're here today. Your life is out of control. You have a life that you have run or about run flat into the ground. There is a God who sovereignly exists for you to come to a saving knowledge of him who has the world in his hand and under his control and can alleviate and bring about all things to good end. Why is that? Because that's what Romans says. For we know that God causes all things to work together for good. To what? Those who are called according to his purpose. Doesn't say all things are good. He says he causes all things to work for good for those who know him. Do you know the sovereign Lord this morning? Do you have a relationship with the sovereign God of the universe who at an appointed time, as Galatians says, sends his Son into the world by a virgin to redeem you back to him? As the praise band comes to sing, if you have these type of questions, I will be more than glad to talk to you. My microphone will be talked off. It'll be a conversation between me, you, and the Lord. If you'll please stand.